Hey, Chef. Great to see you.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's amazing to have you. I know we've been planning this for a while, so it's great to finally have you on the podcast.
Yeah, schedules are always hard in our industry.
Right? Yeah, well, yours is crazy because you actually love to just put on more work than a normal person can handle, and you
True.
somehow get it
Very true.
done. That's every time I see you, you're like, well, I just took over that, and I'm taking over like all inventory for multiple restaurants. It's just like the things you do. But I know we're going to start with an Aperol spritz. Little. So you spent some time in Italy when you were training. How many years did you live there?
I moved there when I was 21 years old, and I lived there for almost 2 years. So worked under some great chefs, Dario Schchini, Fabio Picchi. Faith Willinger was the one who organized my stages. She kind of became like my fairy godmother and just made sure I was well taken care of in my time in Italy. I worked for a great vineyard called Castello d'Ama. I moved south and then moved back to Tuscany because I loved it so much. But due to work, I head back typically once a year. I had a little bit of a gap when we opened Brezza and Barzazio because I was just opening restaurants, but I went back this last year for Cibus, which is a big food festival in Parma, and now I'm heading back in May for Tutto Foods, which is the largest specialty Italian food convention in the world.
Oh, cool. You said you're doing that in May?
May, yep.
So what does that all entail?
A lot of meetings. I have a couple of my Italian purveyors from Chef's Choice, from Liaison West. They'll basically introduce me to a lot of like specialty purveyors. We'll sit down, we'll talk business. Usually eat a lot of prosciutto, usually drink a lot of prosecco, but it's a whole day of just meeting with potential Italian products to bring into the States, and you'll find great olive oils, sea salts from Sicily, red shrimp from Sicily, pretty much anything you can imagine that any foodie or restaurateur would want to bring into their restaurant.
Man, that sounds like a dream.
A lot of eating.
That's my problem is that I really do want to try everything at those things, and I end up like I have one good day. I have one good day where I can really go like ham, and then after that it's like recovery.
Yeah.
So
No,
I'm a victim of like my own
No, this last
desire.
trip, I think we ate probably 3 pounds of cheese in a very short amount of time.
What's your favorite cheese? If you had to pick, let's say two favorite cheeses.
That's hard because when you're in Italy, everything's so fresh. When we were visiting these buffalo mozzarella farms, and you're eating cheeses that were just made like within the last 10 minutes, and they're so tangy and they're so bright and they're so fresh. You're not really getting that in the States because the shelf life is so short. So we get very spoiled in the time that we're in Italy. Now there has been some innovation in freezing some of the fresh cheeses and slowly keeping the preservation of them. But I would say, Parmesan Reggiano is the king of cheeses. I think you always have to have a good Parmesan Reggiano. I know that's one of your favorites. It's great to just snack on or finishing great pastas or preparations. And then I would say probably a buffalo mozzarella because it's just, again, tangy, delicious, reminds me of my time in Puglia.
You're 100% right. I'm obsessed with Parmesan. I can almost have it for an anytime snack, but the problem is once I taste Parmesan, now I need to open up an Italian red with it. I love red wine with Parmesan, or I like dipping it in that a reduced balsamic that's got like the sweetness. Oh, it's like you taste like the fruit of that with the man. So the trip to well, I want to talk more about because we're going to bring up you have a new product that is tell me all about it. You have a new steak.
New and old. So we opened the restaurants with my dry aging program that we branded Bisteaka De Brisson, and I really wanted to. Andy Wang came out with an article for Food and Wine magazine, and we got a lot of traction of people all over the United States wanting to purchase our dry aged steaks. Just with us opening during COVID, kind of the cost of everything right now of shipping and packaging, it's just been really hard to like work out the logistics of a company that can help me with all of that. So we had all this great product in house. Our tomahawks are Bisteaka de Fiorentina, our New York strips, bone in New York strip, and I had people locally, like yourself, or executives at the hotel, or friends of mine that are like, hey, can we purchase your steak retail? So, we're open for hours of operation from 11:30 a.m. till 10 p.m. So I just have those steaks available for purchase. One here.
Yeah, so you brought this, and I know we had a fun movie night where a few of our friends hung out and we did wine, and I grilled this on the Traeger.
Came out great. Yeah.
Freaking amazing. Oh my God. So describe dry age, right? So why do I dry age a steak over what they would call like a wet age or non-aging at all?
So dry age versus wet age, I'm going to just kind of break it down in simple layman's terms. Wet aging is sitting on its own blood in a bag. So when you cryovac something and it's got its own natural blood and juices, it gets those minerality characteristics, that irony flavor from just kind of preserving itself in the cryovac bag. That's all wet age is.
Okay.
You should only wet age typically 3 to 6 weeks. It gets a little more dangerous when you have a bone involved. Then I would really keep it towards that like 3-week kind of side. But dry aging is an interesting process. It's been happening for hundreds and hundreds of years. Back when you would slaughter your local cow and you would eat all the things that would basically degrade quickly or spoil quickly. So all of your offals you would consume almost immediately. Any stewing meat or grinding meat you would make into ragouts or sauces or things that you can hold them and feed a large family in a short amount of time. But then those primal cuts like your short loin and your rib rack, you would take those and you would put them into your barn. And what you're controlling when you're dry aging are 3 major things. You're controlling airflow, temperature, and humidity. So I keep my room about 85% humidity. I keep it at 38 degrees, which is a little cooler than most, and constant airflow. So what we're doing when you have that airflow is you're creating that bark or that crust, which you can knock on, it's almost hard as a rock, and that will preserve the actual piece of meat for an inevitable amount of time or as long as you want to dry age it. So I'm doing mine 90 to 120 days because I find that's when you develop the most flavor profile.
Wow.
Which you tasted the funk when we had the steak together.
That's right. Yeah.
And what happens as you're dry aging is the enzymes continue to break down, making it more palatable. You'll get that deep crimson color. You'll lose moisture content, so it'll become more raisinated. Loss of water will make it that darker color as well, and really just makes the steak forkable and digestible and delicious.
Absolutely. So now is that steak because you're cutting away all that like hard outside of it, right? Is that center steak, would you say it's a little more firm still, like than a typical steak that's not dry aged?
Yeah. I mean, again, you're having moisture loss, so
Right.
it's gonna be firmer, it's gonna be drier. You notice when you cooked it on the Traeger here, you don't have that blood after you cook it and it's resting. It's not kind of sitting in its own juices. It's a little more cleaner. It's a little more. It's all that flavor is kind of contained into the steak. And I honestly dry aging isn't for everybody. You know, it's really definitely taken off as a trend in the last, I would say, 10 years. When we opened Carnevino, it was a little rough for us in the beginning. People didn't understand the process, and they were like, this doesn't taste like the beef I'm used to. You know, I want that big bloody Texas steak.
Yeah.
So you have to know what you're getting in for. If you want something wet age, I love like just a simple strip or a flat iron or a skirt steak, something like that. That's how I would rather eat wet age steak.
And I feel like that's where it comes into play, where a great server or a person, because you're talking to the thing, maybe you're talking to the table, maybe they don't like really know all that you just explained about dry age, but they see a cool dish. I worked at a place that they had, a dry aged New York strip that everyone ordered, and some people like most people loved it, but then the occasional person that didn't know what they were expecting got it, and they're like, oh, this like you said, it's not.
I have a local eye doctor here. He's one of my best customers. He cannot eat dry aged steak because it reminds him of when he was in school, and he said it reminds him of like a dead body or a catheter. So, it's definitely it takes on those rich gorgonzola characteristics, truffle characteristics, like umami. Like it's got a lot of flavor, and you have to be used to that. We opened a Carnevino in Hong Kong. I think probably like my 5th year into Carnevino. We all had a task force crew that moved out there, and we created our own room out there and everything. And our specs were slightly different than the United States, but it wasn't well received in Asia at that time. It was a lot of like too much flavor kind of thing.
Okay.
And we kind of gravitated and changed our menu based around what people wanted. But years later, it was really well received. It just kind of was before its time.
But I wanted to point out that, an effortless way to kind of explain to your table what they're going to get, and without judging or questioning them.
Yeah.
It's like confirm, because you should confirm when someone gives you, hey, I want this steak cooked this way. You go, oh, so yeah, the medium rare, dry aged,
Yeah.
tomahawk. You must love those blue cheese flavors that come through. I'm looking forward to you trying it. I can't wait to. And you're telling now a person that doesn't want that flavor will hear blue cheese. No, I don't want anything to do with blue cheese. You're like, oh no, but it will have those more earthy, blue cheesy, funky notes to it, and it makes it really great steak. But if you're not familiar with it, maybe I'd recommend our wet aged ribeye or something like that. And I wish more people prefaced, because I get it. You work at a place long enough, and you either you assume everyone knows, or they should know, which that's we're in the job of assuming all the negatives that could happen and trying to prevent them before they happen or before they could happen.
Yeah.
So it's just knowing that, oh, this is a unique steak. Like, and again, you said how many days?
90 to 120 days.
That's like where I've been familiar with. You see typically 20 to 40 is like a
the
normal.
industry standards are typically 35 to 45. But
Right. You don't get those notes that you're.
No, and you brought up a great bottle of wine. A lot of it's kind of similar to wine. You're sitting on a product that is costly. You're losing a portion of it. You're throwing away about 15 to 25% because you're losing that bark, you're losing that crust, and you're creating something specialty that you sit on for 3 months before you can even serve.
Right. Yeah. And then also having the you're not doing every steak, I imagine, because you don't have the time anymore to probably prep every single thing in your restaurants, because
Well, that was the crazy thing about Carnevino is every week it was some of my front of the house servers that were really passionate. It was my sous chefs. We called it Meat Throwing Monday, and we were there every single week, moving anywhere from 5 to 15, 20,000 pounds of meat a week. And we would rack it all. We would rotate it all. We would select our reserva program, which were for even longer age steaks. And it was really a great story that I could tell the consumer that I had physically touched every one of these primals like they were my children, and before they hit the table. But now, with all the hats I'm wearing, it's just not as realistic. So I have a dry aging room about 5,000 square feet within out west. So it's USDA monitored. So I can't actually physically touch the primals. I can just give them specs of how I want the beef to be aged.
Right, but that comes out like, do you do initially when you're starting? You do like site visits or whatever, and
and still,
gain
anytime
your
I want to go
trust.
there and spend time in the room and spend time with them, I can anytime. So it's just. It's crazy to think about that. I did that for 8 or 9 years with Carnevino and all of that meat for so long.
Well, I want to touch on a little bit more about Carnevino, and that's kind of when I started to learn about you. And because I had just got at Cut, I was just at Cut, and it was right at the same time that the spot was. It was like a month or two after I got to Cut Carnevino, all the Me Too stuff and whatever. Which I don't know if that's If it happened today, if he would have been one of those people that suffer like this, because I feel like people make mistakes, but it was on the scale of how egregious something might be comparatively to the things that were getting things shut down. That didn't seem that bad, but all these people, all these jobs were lost in the blink of an eye.
Yeah, I mean,
because of one simple, I'm not saying it's minimizing anything, but it's just like one typical or easy. A lot of people have made a fool of themselves and done something a little foolish once in their life. I don't care who you are. So it's like, to me, when you think of all the people that lost their jobs, and then I was working with a guy named Jason, who now is the lead at Cut, but he had come from B&B, and he's great. And it was funny because he was like bar dad at B&B, and then he came over, and we were a little bit different at Cut. It was a little more hip at the time. Like, I don't know. It's been so long since I've been in there. I don't know if the vibe is the same. And I'm sure it's great.
A little more formal.
Yeah, a little more formal, because they updated the bar since I worked there. When I was there, it was, it was still kind of, you had like Chip the server who felt like you were palling with him. If you weren't the person that was like snooty to begin with, he'd play off their guests, But whereas that was sort of more of like a mom and pop spot within Venetian, that wasn't a mom and pop spot because it's Patali, but that's like the vibe of and like more probably regulars going into B&B. So I always thought it was interesting. And what was that transition like for you when you go from being, so you're basically, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you were like basically second in command.
I was culinary director of all 4 restaurants when it happened. So I had held that helm for about 2.5 years when the Me Too movement hit. And what a lot of people don't understand is they thought it was so drastic. And, you know, and Mario is like my dad. So, I mean, he fought for me. He said, you know, you're running this restaurant. We have more female executives than any other restaurant on the Strip. But when it comes to a gaming license, that's where it gets sticky. So, because of our contract and because of the way it was written, and there could not be any tarnish on the gaming license, that's why they were so quick to pull the plug. And honestly, it was still to this day, it was probably the hardest thing I've ever done in my career. You know, it was 365 employees that I had to tell they no longer had jobs, and a lot of them had been with me for anywhere from 10 to 15 years, some of them upwards towards 20. And the husband worked at B&B and the wife worked at Carnevino. You know, I had a lot of families that worked with me, and, you know, I just hired my first 3rd generation runner who had, her dad had been bringing her to our Thanksgiving family meal since she was like tiny. And
Oh my God.
now full circle, she's my runner. And
Well, that's cool. That's incredible. Wow.
Yeah.
You know, it's hard to believe you've already had such, you know, and forgive me for, you know, brown nosing or whatever, an illustrious career. You're very young, you know, and you've just been kind of moving from project to project, and just, it's like you have like, do you have a plan? Do you have a 5 or 10 year plan that you're trying to adhere to? Because I'm just like, wait, she's doing what again now? She's doing another, who has this kind of time?
You know, I think it's a blessing and a curse. You know, I've always, one of the biggest things in my mind when I moved out to Vegas, which, you know, I had driven cross country and ended up with Vegas with not knowing a soul. I didn't know anybody, you know, and what a lot of people, we talk about the cigar industry a lot, and the cigar industry became my family before I had any friends or a network or a community here. And they would only come to town 3 or 4 times a year, but we would spend a lot of time together. We would smoke cigars, as you like to say, like you either golf or smoke cigars. And a lot of that networking kind of started with that community. And, you know, when I was in my early 20s, my biggest goal that I set out to accomplish was to be the youngest female executive chef of a well-known restaurant under a celebrity chef. And that's where I think I was 25 or 26 when I started as the executive chef for Mario Batali. And I had 165 employees under my helm. And I actually did this interview the other day, and somebody asked me, you know, what do you regret the most? And I would say the biggest regret I have is that I didn't actually enjoy those moments, you know, because I kept hitting those hurdles and accomplishing those things. I didn't take 2 steps back to just say,
Soak it in.
yeah, and just say, wow, I did this. It was always like, okay, what's next? And what's next? And what's next?
But that's probably a great, you know, reason why I feel like every time you look up, you're doing something else cool, is because it's one of those things, like momentum isn't forever, you know, and you can, you know, be an established person, open, you know, and then momentum goes away. And yeah, you open up something cool and people are excited about it, but you're not, it's like how you see the same celebrity in every movie for like a 5-year span or a 10-year span. And then you don't really see them much anymore. And then it's you know, so it's like, right now, it's like your name is getting out there, so you actually have to strike while the iron is hot.
You have to grind, and, you know, it's like anything else. Like in Vegas, everything has a shelf life, you know, and I think specifically chefs, like I still go to tables and people are like, oh, honey, are you old enough to be the chef? And it gets kind of exhausting explaining, you know, that I started in kitchens when I was 14 years old. And, you know, I've been working, I mean, what's that bring me to, I'm 44 now, that's like 30 years in kitchens.
Well, where's all your stress lines? I normally see, you know, a chef that's got like 12, you know, brow marks because he's always stressed out. What's going on with, how do you maintain this healthy lifestyle?
To come out with a dry aged beef cosmetic line because I attribute it to all the dry aged fat and not going outside my.
I mean, that's true, right? So, I mean, I know the carnivore diet is a big thing right now, and I'm super big on eating like high meat. Don't get me wrong, I love my carbs. I wish I could get rid of like potatoes out of my life, but it's my guilty pleasure is like a fried potato of any sort. But that is like a health style, because, you know, back in the day they were talking about, what was it, cholesterol was such a big problem and whatever, but they're finding out that we need cholesterol. Like, no, it's all the other gunk you're putting in your body.
Fats versus bad fats, you know, and you know that I spend a lot of time on my sourcing. You know, all the dry aged beef line, that is all Creekstone. I spent time out with every one of those cattle ranchers and with Ryan, who hand selects a lot of the cattle himself. I buy all heritage breeds of goats, turkeys, chickens, any kind of game. I'll buy from Heritage Foods USA. We support the Ann Soxaby Legacy Fund every year. That was Patrick Martin's wife. We started the slow food chapter out here. Another boutique farm I support is Cape Graham out of Australia. It's some of the best air quality in the world, and those cows are like right beachside grazing on some of the best grass, and that's our grass-fed wet age line, which you can really taste just the cleanness, the freshness. It's the herbaceousness of the steak because of how those cows are treated and how they live.
Is it like that's another question for me is the sustainability, because everyone is starting to understand that if you take care of the animal, then it's healthier meat. Why do you go pasture raised over cage free? Cage free is kind of like, for the most part, a joke, because it's just like, technically they open the cage, it's like you're cage free. Whereas pasture raised is kind of like the best. Organic pasture raised is like the best eggs, but they're like also $9 a 12-pack.
Yeah, but you have to really just understand the farmers themselves and spend the time to go out there and talk to them. It was in my early 20s, I got diagnosed with Hashimoto's disease, which is an autoimmune disease where your thyroid is dead. And there wasn't much, knowledge about the particular disease when I got diagnosed. Now here 20 years later, a lot of my friends have it. There's a lot more progression in the actual treatment of the disease. But I was really frustrated because I said, okay, I'm an Italian chef, and everything I'm doing in my career, the stress, the long hours, the not eating, the alcohol, all of that is affecting this disease and in making it harder for me to actually operate on a daily basis. But then it was me going out to the chicken farms and the pig farms and realizing that pigs and chickens and turkeys are born with thyroid disease. So that's why we started injecting them with heavy antibiotics so that they could withstand the temperature differentials, the winds, the cold, all of that stuff. And it really kind of opened my eyes to the industry, and that's when I started talking to Frank Reese, and he's building this amazing school to teach young individuals about the future farming and preserving these brands these heritage breeds, because to eat them is to save them. If we don't continue to buy them and support them, there is actually a chicken breed that is meant to be poached, that's meant to be roasted, that's meant to be fried.
Like there's different breeds for different things, you're saying?
For different culinary purposes. But the problem is the most rapid developing breed of chicken in America is the one that fits perfectly in a KFC bucket.
Oh my God. That's interesting.
Yeah, and it's kind of sad when you think about it.
Well, yeah, and I wanted to interrupt and say, like, wait, did you say all turkeys and chickens are born with thyroid disease? What does that mean? Like, what are you talking about?
It's in pigs and chickens just like it's in humans. It's an autoimmune disease that
That's common?
Yeah. Yep.
And what's that? Why? Is that, do you think that was like through history? It's like, oh yeah, since the beginning of time.
Well, I think a lot of it's the way that we treat our food, and it's what we put into our bodies is so important. And, thyroid disease is either hereditary or it's stress induced. So, I think
that makes sense in the factory farming stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you think about, it was so undiagnosable for so long. People just didn't. I had a doctor, literally, my first endocrinologist I went to out here, he said, okay, you're going to take this pill for the rest of your life and you'll feel fine. And I'm like, but I don't feel fine. I feel like I got hit by a truck every day, and I went through 3 endocrinologists, and I actually got a natural doctor through Michael Severino's wife. She was doing the beef and Barolo events with us with the Battaglia group, and I was probably at the worst health-wise I had ever been. And she said, please, see this doctor. And he spent a lot of time with me just breaking down all my years of medical history and, really going, I had researched on my own this drug called LDN, low-dose naltrexone. It was prescribed to heroin addicts and alcoholics in the 80s. And what it does is it ups your serotonin levels during the day. And it's getting a lot of recognition for thyroid disease because you have that lethargy, you have that brain fog, you feel like you've been hit by a truck. And what it does is it affects your sleep, and as soon as I went on it, I slept better. I could actually sleep more than 4 hours a night.
Wow.
And I had that clarity when I woke up that I hadn't had in years. So it was really, but I had to push. Endocrinologists wouldn't prescribe it to me because it wasn't weren't trained on it. The hospitals didn't fund it. You know, it was a lot of the things they're pushing you to be prescribed are because they built that hospital or they funded that education. And
Right.
you know, there's a lot of biasness on what doctors actually should prescribe you or shouldn't. And
Right. That's why it's like, man, and I don't want to get in too deep into the medical field because it's not really, this podcast isn't really about that. But at the same time, it is very relevant in, you know, I wanted to draw attention to the fact that, yes, like a cigar isn't necessarily good for you. A cocktail or an alcoholic beverage isn't necessarily good for you, you know, but there is something to be said about like how we met, really how we got to know each other, I should say, because I always knew about you. But when I opened up 8 Cigar Lounge under Click and John Petty, and you were opening up Bar Zazu and Brezza, and then we shared that hallway and we got our food from you, which was awesome because I feel like we stole all your best items for our guests too. And I'm like, well, it's like in a way it kind of probably doesn't help Brezza's business. Well, like butts and seats at Brezza,
yeah.
Because, you know, hey, I got that really delicious sandwich, you know, over at the Cigar Lounge. So I always thought it was like, man, we got the best end of that stick, you know. And
I think it took people a while to realize that food was coming from us.
yeah, that's fair.
Which now I feel like 3 years in, you know, we're going to hit 4 years in June. A lot of people do associate it with us. And, you know, there's a lot of times that I'll be smoking a cigar at Cigar Lounge after hours or when I'm done with work, and people want to like have reservations at Brezza the next day or the next day. And, you know, I think it's great that we can capture that clientele for hopefully the 2 or 3 days that they're here. But then, like, you know, there's a lot of local celebrities and locals that hang out there as well. So it's such an eclectic. I think Giuseppe's really kind of captured magic in a bottle there. You know, it's one of the most beautiful cigar lounges. He's doing just such a great job offering an experience that you can't find on the strip much.
Yeah, Giuseppe's one of those guys, like he'd rather it make less money and be like cooler, look nicer, very, very about aesthetics. But reason I brought that up was because I wanted to say that we have these little indulgences that, you know, to the person that's a teetotaler and doesn't drink at all and doesn't smoke a cigar and, you know, to me, these are stress relievers. Obviously you can go, you know, you want to drink responsibly, right? I've made the mistake of drinking too much plenty of times in my life, and that's not the goal. You know what I mean? But like 1 or 2 cocktails over the course of an evening is almost healthy for you, in my opinion, because of your mindset. If you work very hard and you don't get that day to soak in the fruits of your labor, then what are you doing it for? You know, I never understand how the billionaire that keeps working and doesn't have, you know, this, you know, you see him on the luxury yacht, but whatever. But it's like when is enough, and when do you stop and smell the roses?
Yeah.
And to me, having that cigar and having the cocktail is that smell the roses moment that you should have occasionally.
I've been smoking now so I got introduced to the cigar community because Barry Abrams needed a rereservation at Carnevino. And Barry Abrams, cigar aficionado, wine spectator.
Oh, okay.
And he didn't want to pay the room minimum. So he called Joe Bastianich and he said, I don't want to deal with the events coordinator. And he said, okay, from here on out, you're going to deal with Chef Nicole. And Barry just really opened the floodgates to me and the cigar community. I first met from Alec Bradley Cigars. I met Alan Rubin, who quickly became like a father figure to me. Sammy from La Polina Cigars. He also worked for Rocky Patel and Alec Bradley as well. Soon enough, like it just kind of took off like wildfire. J.C. Newman, My Father's Cigars, all the major players were dining at Carnevino, and a big part of it was because we let them smoke in that private dining room, which could never happen anymore. But and now we have a great patio that connects with AIDS patio, so it becomes just the hangout for every major cigar label when they're in town. They're going back and forth from 8 Cigar Lounge to Brezza and networking, and it's really I'm so fortunate to have Sammy. I went to his wedding, and Rocky was the best man, and his parents cooked me the most amazing Indian food I had ever had in my life. You know, they asked to cook for me for one night, and I was like, how much of a privilege is that, you know?
Right. That's actually got to be super nerve-wracking when you're like, I'm going to cook for you, chef. You know,
but I mean,
you're like, it's delicious. Yeah. You're
not
not the type of person that would ever say anything negative to someone, even if you know, might have thought it. But
well, I think
that's got to be nerve-wracking.
Every chef loves food that they don't have to cook themselves, you know.
right? Me and Adam O'Donnell were talking about on the previous episode that, or previous episode that released recently, was that, you know, the chef that craves the fast food burger, you know, do you have like a craving like that? Not necessarily a fast food burger, but do you have one of those things where you're like, it's not very chefy, but
I mean, Korean barbecue is my guilty pleasure, and it's so good to eat for. I'm not supposed to eat gluten. I'm not supposed to eat a lot of things with some of my health issues, but Korean barbecue is easy because it's just protein. It's fermented vegetables, which are great for your gut. You know, it's quick. You can do
yeah.
like I can stop somewhere at midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning. But honestly, I think I'm one of those few chefs that I cook at home a lot. I cook a ton. My neighbors and I, we do dinner parties together all the time. We theme them. I do a huge annual Easter party where I make, last year I did 5 sides of salmon, 3 different kinds of pierogies. We did a smoked ham, turkey, you name it. It was way too much food, but it's always a fun. It started out with my housewarming and just kind of went off from there. But
This day and age, you don't hear a neighborhood like that too often. I feel pretty fortunate in my neighborhood. You know, we all, when we bought these houses, they were built, you know, in 2017, and we know a lot of each other.
Yeah.
Besides the people that have moved on.
Yeah.
So it's kind of it's great when you have like that's your neighborhood. You know, you're having dinner parties with each other. How
really
positive
what
of an
made me
environment.
stay in Vegas as long as I did. You know, John Nairn are two of my best friends, and he helped me find my house originally. And honestly, like it gives you such a sense of security when you live in a crazy town like Vegas that you know the people 6 houses down.
Well, I mean, now how would you ever leave now, right? Like now I mean, obviously you'll move on to do other projects outside of Vegas, but at the same time, you'll never not be in Vegas, right? You know what I mean?
You never know. I mean,
Where else might you go?
Yeah.
If you were to leave Vegas, where would you want to go?
I mean, we get opportunities all the time with just inquiries of, hey, do you want to open this restaurant in New York? Do you want to open this restaurant in LA? And, you know, a lot of times the spaces are too big or the deal's not right. But we're always looking. We're always looking to expand the brand and move
Is it
into
always major cities, like always big cities, right? They're
Yeah.
the only ones that can sustain that high level of restaurant.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to go back to my roots in New York, you know, but my family's all upstate, so it's like much more rural, it's much more country. But it was really cool to see this last year when I went home. A lot of the Batali Bastianich chefs I'd worked with over the years, specifically Guy Arnone from Babbo, he now has his own restaurant in Hudson. Anthony Sasso, who worked for Batali for many years. He got Michelin stars through Casamona. He now has his own restaurant in Kingston that he operates with his sister and his family. And I think post-COVID, so much of the city has crept out to the upstate area, making it more trendy, making it more boutique-y. But it's cool to see because when I grew up, you know, it was just a lot of like,
Sourcing's got to be a lot easier at that point too, right? If you're
you-
closer to your farms, you're
yeah, there's
closer to.
farms in your backyard. You know, I mean, the growing season is very short because the winters are so long. But you can preserve a lot. I mean, my mom used to spend the entire summer preserving items for our long winter. So, I mean, we had peach trees, we had apple
mean,
trees, we had pear trees, we had blueberry bushes, we had strawberry pyramids, and she would just spend all summer canning, you know. So we would have fresh tomatoes for tomato sauces, and I would get ready for school in the morning, and we'd have our cream of wheat with like a perfectly preserved half pear in it, or peach from our peach trees, and
Kind of what you're doing your beef too, though, right?
yeah, yeah,
I mean, so something that got harvested 6 to 6 months ago
yeah,
can now be enjoyed in the middle of winter
yeah.
or beginning of spring when it would normally be out of season, right?
Yeah, and there's a lot of like small lamb farms out there, and but you know, I've made Vegas my home. I've been here for 21 years now, and it's hard to believe it's been that long, and it's gone so quick at the same time. But I think that the Vegas lifestyle is so conducive to the chef lifestyle. Again, you can go out and eat anywhere from midnight to 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. You know, it's go, go, go. It's always changing. It's always reinventing itself. I mean, the neighborhood I live in wasn't even close to being here when I first moved in, and now I hit like 4 or 5 lights in front of Durango that these weren't even here a year ago. It's the development of the city and just how fast it's growing, and
Do you miss glaciers over there?
I never went.
You never went?
I never went.
Place was
and
awesome.
I know.
That's the grocery store.
Yeah, I heard it was great. I heard it was really great. But you know, we're lucky to have like Featherblade and all these like independent butcher shops and boutique. And I think more and more that like specialty market and food hall is going to kind of just continue to develop. And I'm excited for the Japanese food hall that's opening at Uncommons. That's going to be really unique and different.
They seem like they've been going through a couple of iterations so far, trying to find their rhythm over at Uncommons.
Yeah, I think it was weird that Durango kind of opened at the same time because they're fighting for the clientele and Durango being 24 hours a day and, our culture in the city, so much gambling and
Stations too.
points and yeah, people want to have that loyalty and I think it became like Red Rock 2.0 in a lot of ways. And they're already building the other tower, so I mean it's great for my home cost,
Yeah, that's fair. One of my favorite disc golf courses is right around the corner from there.
Which one?
Red Ridge,
Oh yeah.
Red Ridge Park.
Yep.
It's super simple, but it's beautiful because you're not gonna hit traffic or
Yeah.
throw a disc in somebody's backyard.
No, honestly, when I have a day off, I don't really have to leave the vicinity of my neighborhood. I have Black Sheep, I have Anima by EDO, I have Other Mama that I go to with my neighbors all the time, and I just have that little like cluster of great restaurants, and there are more opening every day, but I don't have to fight the traffic of the Strip, and I deal with that already 6-7 days a week most times. So
Yeah, that's the thing with this town, because there's always opportunities to have sips of stuff. So it's like that's another thing I think about a lot is how many people are driving and being safe and all that stuff. So that's another thing that you obviously have to balance in life is, I'm surrounded in all these events with all these, there's always people, hey, would you like a glass of champagne? Yeah, it's like I went to a cocktail competition the other night at Esther's, and Tucker St. John, he comes over, he drops me in tomorrow. Someone else is like, hey, I'm buying you a shot. And then someone else walks in, hey, mezcal. And, so it's like by the end of it, I was like, so wait, when did we leave? And then you're like, because of my life and the way I'm moving around at all times and I'm going to a lot of different bars and events, you almost never see me behind the wheel of a car at all anymore. So I'm an Uber aficionado at this point. I wanted to tell the audience and you what we have going on here. So every episode I ask 3 cocktails that the guests would like to either talk about, drink, both. And you said Aperol Spritz, Gin Fizz, and Americano. So we're going to do, since in that Aperitivo Hour vibe, we're going to move into the Americano. And I was thinking before the podcast today, I was like, man, I don't want to open up another bottle of sweet vermouth. But even if you refrigerate it at all times, it still is different after a month or 2.
yeah.
And this one has probably been open for several months.
Okay.
So then I opened this one fresh today, and me and Kyler were just sitting around, and we were just like, oh, let's compare and see the difference. So I didn't know if you wanted to compare the difference yourself, because I've actually never sat down and had an old vermouth that was still well taken care of, but it's past its prime, and then where it's a brand new, fresh.
Yeah, let's do
So if you want, they're in order.
Okay.
So this is the old one, that's the new one, and is there any truth to that? Obviously, if you don't refrigerate a wine-based product with a low ABV, it's going to go bad in short order. And even because it's a wine-based product, it sort of has this organic life to it where it's not going to last forever. It deteriorates. Whereas a spirit in the bottle stays the same throughout time. It could, a bottle up here, I mean, minus some of the ones with sugar that you'll see have lost some of their color and stuff. The spirits themselves, they're the same 10 years later, as long as there's not just like majority of oxygen in the glass. That's the only other thing that would change it.
Yeah.
So did you notice a difference?
It seemed a little more syrupy.
Okay.
Did you agree?
Yes. I had a specific note that I was wondering if you, because like for me, the comparison was like the herbaceousness came out a little more.
Yeah,
And
this has more of a fresher characteristic to it and brighter.
this one smelled like a fruit roll-up almost to me, including that artifice, which this is Vermouth di Torino. Koki's one of the best. I think it's Nate Green and Ken Dayton.
I'm surprised at how well that they're both. I mean, obviously this one was just open, but it's still drinking really well.
Well, and that's the other debate we were having. I was like, if you're drinking vermouth neat or on the rocks, which I've said before is a cocktail already by itself. Throw a peel on there, you got a garnish, you're crushing it with new aromas. But for a cocktail, especially because this one is going to be equal parts Campari and sweet vermouth, I'm still going to stick with the new one. But if I was doing like a Negroni, I don't know that one is different enough that with the Campari and with the gin that I would be able to pick up the difference. But by itself, I can definitely pick up the
No,
difference.
for sure.
So I was curious about your opinion on that, and I thought, we always hear like, don't you have to refer? Always hear all these
Yeah,
rules.
and I usually throw vermouth after a month. I don't know if that's correct.
Well, that seems expensive. But then again, at the same time, I wanted to say that try to find those, if you're drinking for yourself and your loved one, or like, let's say you're in a marriage and you have the occasional Manhattan or whatever, but it's not every single night or whatever, then you buy, if you can find those the 375 milliliter ones, the half bottles. I like those much more because you don't feel so bad if, hey, it's been open for
Yeah.
2 months. All right, I'm going to toss it, but it was only actually a few ounces that you're throwing.
Exactly.
Versus like this was that's like a half bottle, and it would be a bummer to throw that out.
Yeah. So the reason why I brought up the Americano was when I worked for Dario Cecchini at the butcher shop. We did this. We did an Americano and Negroni party that was very meat centric, and it was all these small bites of like the stuff from the butcher shop, and you don't realize when you're only consuming Americanos and Negronis throughout the evening how quickly it can catch up with you because they're all very spirit forward cocktails. But
Well, I was gonna say though, to that point, this is a sessionable drink, and considering that it's not like like a Negroni isn't sessionable because you're putting at least 80 proof gin, plus your Campari and sweet vermouth. Which sweet vermouth, what do I want to say, is like 15%.
yeah,
This Coqui di Torino is 16%. So this plus Campari, which I want to say is like 30. If I'm remembering correctly, 24%.
okay,
Whereas I know Aperol is 11. So both of these drinks, we're not getting like intoxicated off of. If I have an Aperol spritz and a Americano, I think as long as I'm not like pounding it and walking out the door, I feel like I might still be under the legal limit. Versus two Negronis, you're done. You're going to be over the legal limit.
yeah,
Like I said, that's kind of, now it's always my thought, because in this town, thinking of all the people, all the bars, all the restaurants, all the people that are having drinks with their food, how many people know that they're driving safely? That's why I like these sessionable cocktails, because it's not the same. You don't have to total. You can have 2 cocktails.
yeah.
You just can't have 2 strong ones.
Yeah.
But so I do want to talk on the Americano. It actually, about 1860, I know this was created at Gaspar Campari's bar in Milan. And they had another bar in Milan that had already made the Me Too, Milano Torino, because you have this Torino vermouth. So the base of the Me Too is essentially these 2 ingredients. And then adding the shot of club soda.
Soda water, yeah.
But with, and then when people will say, okay, then when did the Negroni come around? That was about 1908. Count Camillo Negroni was usually having an Americano, but then he said, hey, how about we take out the club soda and we put in the gin? And that is how it was born. And I'll say this, Livio, who is one of my favorite mentors, and he'll be on the podcast soon enough, he's very particular. Campari, he believes shouldn't be on a big cube, which I totally agree for his reasoning. Aesthetically, I love a Negroni on a big cube. I just like the way it looks. It's like an old fashioned.
Yeah.
Doesn't, sometimes
I also
you would say,
appreciate
does
the
it make it better?
dilution too. You don't want it to. I would prefer it with a big cube.
Yeah, because it doesn't dilute, so you
Yeah.
can sit with it longer. Now, here's the other thing. I drink pretty fast.
Yeah.
So it's like, I don't need something to, if anything, I need something that slows me down more, But that proper dilution with regular ice, and like a Negroni, it definitely makes sense to me, because this is a drink that kind of evolves or not this one, but the Negroni evolves in that sense that as that dilution happens, you're enjoying it a little bit differently, because while it starts up front, pretty bold and pretty powerful. If you let it sit with your regular ice for a couple minutes while you're drinking it, it will become a little bit more of a lighter, easier to drink cocktail than it was when it initially started.
Yeah.
Versus the cube, which to your point, kind of keeps it the very same, a lot more the same as it would be, than it would be.
You could probably get a longer spoon.
We definitely need to highlight. We definitely need to highlight the level of spoon that people can have. I actually see a benefit to having a long spoon. There is reason behind it.
That you do.
It's not it's not just one of those things that I want to make tricks with it. It's like if you get a lot of spoons that brands will give you or something and they're about that long, like right to about here. So now it's like if I wanted to put this all the way down at the bottom and I'm stirring, my fingers are really close to the liquid.
Yeah.
You know, so there's a lot of reasons I actually do prefer this length of a spoon, and I can't imagine it getting much longer on this though. That'd be really funny. Here we are, and I love these suggestions. And also to finish up, so Aperitivo Hour is an Italian tradition. Now, did you personally enjoy those? Did you go to those a lot in Italy? And can you tell me from your personal experience, without my textbook knowledge of it, tell me what it was like and what that means to the culture in your area, at least where?
I mean, again, I moved to Italy when I had just turned 21, so I could have started drinking when I was 5 in Italy. I mean, you can drink at any age. And I realized really quick, just going to restaurants and being with Italians, just how much a part of like the culture, but like also the networking and the social aspect. You know, you don't have dinner until earliest 9:30, 10 o'clock at night, typically. You know, you want to have that.
In Italy, that's normal?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, in Europe, most places, you know, it's a much later dinner because you have that siesta in the afternoon, and then your aperitivo hour usually starts like anywhere from 5 to 7:30, and you're snacking on like little small bites of cicchetti and some kind of aperitivo, which is usually Aperol Spritz or
What's
Negroni.
Cicchetti?
Yeah.
Cicchetti are small Venetian bites. So like when you go to the cicchetti bars in Venice, it's basically all those little bites that you would enjoy while you're having an aperitivo.
Okay.
Could be like a little deviled egg or potato chips or a fried olive or another common, any kind of like little marinated salad or seafood item. But really, because you're not having your meal till much later, it just kind of basically makes you salivate and gets you excited for that big Italian meal.
Absolutely. And that's, you know, when we opened up Vetri, Livio came in and he was talking about the Aperitivo Hour with the staff. And now I work at Bramare. I'm obsessed with Italian. It's like steakhouse or Italian. Those are the two places I belong in restaurants. But at Bramare, we just started an Aperitivo Hour. And that's the thing is, the other thing about it is short. It's not meant to be a sustaining meal. It's not a happy hour in the sense of, oh, here's your discounted drink, even though we at Bramare will have discounted prices for the Aperitivo Hour.
Yeah.
It's about the, before you go to the commute, but most people work in the city and they travel to the rural area. That's at least how it was explained to me by Livio. And he would say, you know, before you head back home, you do a little one cocktail and some olives or something to bite just while you go home. You have a drive, and then you're going to enjoy dinner with your family. But this is just that little stop off.
Yeah.
And I always loved that. I love that culture about, like, that's my favorite thing about Italians in general is that leisure and the enjoyment of
About
life.
The food, the drink, you know, it's just, I probably worked just as many hours when I lived in Italy. You know, my day would usually start at like 5, 6 o'clock in the morning. I would work a full like extended lunch shift. We would go home. We would have our siesta, but a lot of times I wouldn't typically sleep because I was an American and I would want to explore parts of Italy that I would never really get to see. And you know, then you're working till about midnight, and it's just so focused around the food and the wine and the spirits, and it just becomes. I remember the first lunch that Dario Cecchini, he was like, "Okay, we're gonna leave the butcher shop. We're gonna go to this lunch. My friend's cooking," and it was 6, 8 courses, I think. We went from antipasti to pasta, and the pasta was like this lasagna with bechamel and ragu, like a bolognese, and then you went into your proteins, which are like these large format grilled steaks, similar to like the Bisteaka De Brisson line, and then by the end, you know, you've drank wine. You've had your aperitivo, you drink wine, and then you go into your Vinsanto, and then you go into your grappa because of the area that we were in. We were in Tuscany. And then I'm like, oh, 21 years old, that's a lot to drink for lunch. And then Dario's like, okay, let's go back to work. Like, okay. It's just different, you know.
That's how I know I'm Italian, because I can definitely function with a drink or two, you know, I work with a lot of Italians, and it's just one of those things like, just a little Aperol, like, you know, it's like, that's nothing when you're working, you know, so it's pretty funny. Don't do that. But
Legally.
yeah, right. Definitely don't do it unless you're the owner and you're not actually behind the bar, you know.
Yeah.
So I do want to talk about we mentioned the cigar smoke. You brought me to Big Smoke, and that was such a cool experience. And it really to highlight the fact that you're not just well known in the chef world, in the culinary world. You're well known in the cigar world to where I honestly I was just a tagger along, and then we're like cutting lines, and then like not even cutting lines. We're just kind of like the guy behind or the girl behind the counter is just like, hey, Nicole, come on, and I'm like, I'm with her. And we would follow back, and we're like watching all the people going by, and they're just like, here's a couple, try these cigars. Here's some cigars. It's basically like Disneyland as far as like retail. Like you're going down the line, getting all these great cool cigars.
Like trick or treating for adults.
It really is. Yeah. That is a great descriptor.
Yeah.
And going with you is like going with the ceremony master. Because everyone's trying to talk to you, see what you're doing new. And how did you get involved with Big Smoke besides, or was it just because of Carnevino and you had that smoking room sort of deal back there? Is that
it kind of
how this evolved?
started with that, and then Barry pretty early on asked me to start doing the Big Smoke breakfasts. So Big Smoke used to be a 4-day experience. So Thursday would typically be the kickoff. He would usually buy out a space and bring all the who's who of the industry in, and we would have like usually small bites and drinks, and really it was a good networking opportunity. And then the 2 major Big Smoke days were Friday and Saturday, and then Sunday you would go into the Big Smoke breakfast where we'd do rolling demos, and we'd usually have a Bloody Mary at the breakfast. And what I would have to do is I would be up on stage preparing the dish that I selected, and then the banquet department would execute that said dish for 800, 1,500, 2,000 people, whatever it was that particular year. But we did everything. I did Polish themed breakfasts. I did Nicaraguan themed breakfasts. I did the Italian one. I did these Barolo poached eggs with a black truffle bitter green salad, and what else did I have? Oh, cotechino. I love cotechino. And it was such a great, like, rich, like, you want something that they can taste whether they've smoked cigars for 4 consecutive days, and it was always like, it was similar to our worlds where it's like the chef front of the house industry where you're going hard. I mean, we're doing these events and we're up together till like 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. I might go home and sleep for like an hour and a half, and then I'd be up on stage doing the demo, and it was just really like I don't know, this weird like camaraderie that we had with each other because we were all kind of in the trenches and stuff together. But
forged in fire, right?
yeah. But and it got me. It was a fast course to the cigar industry. We literally would smoke 5, 6 cigars on an evening, sitting there talking and networking, and I learned everything I learned about cigars from these guys. They taught me how to light my first cigar, how to cut my first cigar, how to enjoy it, all the nuances, and now I know what I like and I don't like, and I experiment a little bit more. But like, back to your point, for me as a chef and my lifestyle just being so go, 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 it's the only time in my life that I can actually spend 45 minutes to just decompress and kind of breathe. And I'm really lucky. Drew Strotza, who works over at Resorts World, he's become like my best friend, and a lot of it's because we just smoke a cigar at the end of our long day and network and talk about the industry and what's happened and what's to come, and it really became such a social thing for me.
It's definitely, the camaraderie of the cigar community is definitely something I cherish and I look forward to. Another spot that me and you got to know each other really well was J.R. Starkis, who will be on the podcast I'll be recording in a couple weeks with him. He has a cigar club, and, we're always hoping you'll show up. There's certain faces you just always hope are there. And then it's just also, it's like a sitcom of Cheers, where you have your common characters, and then you also have the guy or gal that drops in for like the once every 4 or 6 months.
Yep.
And you're just like, hey, so.
And what I love about that cigar club, which, I mean, you guys got me involved in the first place, I remember sitting there a couple months ago and just thinking, and I was like, this is the most normal I've ever felt in Vegas because, you know, JR is such a family man. And George he used to work at Sapphire back when we opened Resorts World. And a lot of those guys, like they're family men, you know, they have their kids that are now teenagers or early 20s in college. And all they're talking about are their kids' sports and going home to their wives and having dinner. And it just feels so normal, which you don't get I don't get that a lot in
Yeah,
Vegas.
no, definitely not. And I mean, like to that point, it's also kind of you look if you're that person that has that life with the family and the kids and the picket fence or whatever, you kind of need that like escape also where it just breaks the monotony. You're like, hey, this is that thing I do every month.
Yeah.
You know, I do this. Let me have this. You know, so and I feel like that's probably some of the people that show up. One of their things too is like, man, I get so much more than just cigars and a decent conversation. It's like, this is my time to kind of relax, get to, you know, and you catch up because in that crowd, you know, we have an incredible executive chef. We have people that are distributors, reps, work for the suppliers directly for the brands. You know, you'll see Kenny Jordan, who works with Weber Ranch. And you know, it's not only a who's who and hey, it's great to catch up, but it's like, so what's happening in town? You know what I mean?
If you want your gossip, come to the Cigar Club.
It's incredible. I love it so much, and when I miss it, I'm so mad at myself. But yeah, and then so okay, finally, I do want to talk about. So you're doing some sort of pop up.
Yeah, actually, it's super exciting. I feel like I've been talking about it at length lately because we've just had so many meetings, kind of getting prepared and working out all the logistics. But Robbie Felice, actually pronounce it Felice, but in Italian you want to pronounce it Felice, which is weird. He was one of my sous chefs at B&B. Young kid, him and Brian Arruda were like two really young, attractive guys who were just like making their way through Vegas, clubbing it every night, you know, just like wild children. And I was like their Vegas mom, you know, keeping them in check and like making sure they showed up to work and that they didn't die in
Another
Vegas.
responsibility for you, right?
And yeah, he became like my little brother, and I'm so proud of him. He's gone out to open. He just opened his 4th restaurant in Montclair, New Jersey. So he's got a couple osterias. He's got Pasta Ramen, which finally got its first brick and mortar post-COVID. And he's got Bar Moots, which is a mozzarella bar that he just opened. And he's really just created this like really fun brand for himself. He's partnered with Morimoto, so he's just really like hitting the culinary scene in such a fierce way. And he would really love to have more of a presence in Vegas, you know, and we kept talking about Barzazu and how pretty of a room it is and how the coloring scheme and everything really hits the vibe of pasta ramen. So we're bringing an Italian-Japanese concept to Vegas. We're going to do our media dinner in the middle of, what month are we in? It's going to be in the middle of March, and then we'll start it. I might be messing these dates up. April. We're going to start it the middle of May. So our media dinner will be in April. It'll start the middle of May. And then if it takes off and it's got great traction, we'll just keep it going for as long as through the summer, hopefully, you know, and just really give that space such great energy and one of my sous chefs and one of my managers are going to go out there and stage for a few days in Montclair, New Jersey, really giving them the opportunity to absorb their cocktail program, absorb their food, and come back with all that knowledge to teach my staff. And I love seeing people grow and learn, and you know that's a lot of what I got to do with the Pally Group was travel a lot and just work under some of these great chefs and people and mentors, and I hope to be able to do the same for my guys as well.
Yeah, wow, I like that, and it's funny because there's a lot of pop-ups that are emphasizing different things. There's like a sandwich pop-up. You'll be able to refer that better than I will, but because I've never made it to those events, but I know that they're doing those where there's chefs that make these cool gourmet sandwiches. There's the pop-ups with the pizza pop-ups, you know, like Sandauer is doing those pop-ups where a new chef comes in all the time. I forget what the frequency of it is, but you know, and they completely flip it and put like a really unique twist on the pizzas that are normally offered there. Sparrow and Wolf does a couple different pop-ups. I know the coolest one that
supposed to do the takeover soon with Brian. I think I'm doing it in May. Actually,
Chef Brian Howard.
Yep.
Amazing. What would that pop up? If you're
he's doing like what is he calling it? It's like bar snacks, I think.
Oh yeah, the bar snacks
the
one.
late night.
Oh, cool. So you'll be the chef for that?
Yeah.
And I had a great time. We were there for bar snacks last month, and that was my first one because I missed their first one, and you know, they had the performers where they're like a woman in stilts walking
wow.
around,
Yeah.
and you know, a couple like Cirque types people. The color, like the tone of the lighting and everything is completely different. It's a lot more like hip, and I feel like it was like almost a disco themed one, and it was so fun and so cool. And you know, you try a lot of light bites and stuff, and I like that they're doing that. And I think that's kind of another new. Vegas is very. Everyone wants everyone to succeed in Vegas, right? People might not realize that the bar and hospitality and the culinary community is pretty like close knit, tight. It's a small town when you really think about it, even with all these concepts, you know.
Oh, there's only 2 degrees of separation in the city.
Yeah.
100%. Well, especially with this guy, it's so funny because Tyler not only is a masterful editor and does editing around, you know, he'll travel out of the city and do WWE stuff, or he'll go like he did like an Apple project in London, and I was like, okay, that's cool. And then also we're at gigs all the time, and we just did the Power of Love at MGM, and he was one of the bar managers because they have bar tenders that pour. We're not allowed to because it's union.
Yeah.
And it's just funny because we're doing all like it's more like set up for the whole day.
Yeah.
And you make sure the bars have all the stuff they have, and then at the very end, all of us are together. Like there's like 13 plus Livio, and we're making the dessert cocktails happen, and it's about 1,400 plus cocktails that you have to make in about 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And it's like, let's go. It's just crazy because it's a lot of pressure, you know, there's spills, there's, so it's a lot of fun. But every person that would pass him by that was like MGM staff, they'd be like, oh yeah, we work together here, we work together there. And it's just like, dude, you haven't even been in bartending behind like a restaurant bar in years, and you still constantly running into people.
Yeah, I always say if you've survived in Vegas anywhere over 5 years, you pretty much know most of the industry, you know. And then when you get to where we're at, like 20 years, that's.
I love that you said we're at, because I'm like watching you, and I'm like, yeah, let me start a podcast. That's about where I'm at. I'm at starting a podcast as far as what I've done, but that's the goal is to constantly move the needle. And I do find that in this town, it's so easy to get ahead. It really is. If you just work, just work your butt off, you know, and the less you complain, the more they'll like you.
Yeah,
you know what I
as long
mean?
as you're not complete degenerate and you can survive.
I mean, that goes without saying. In any job, it doesn't matter, right? If you're drinking on the job, if you're stealing, all these things, you're not hireable. You should be fired.
It's just a little Aperol.
I mean, hey, you know, that's another understanding. You know, if you once in a while I get to taste spirits at like Bramare, Constantine gets it. You know, I want to offer the experience, and sometimes I haven't tried. Like obviously, I haven't tried every single product on the back bar at Bramare, which is pretty cool because I've tried everything on this back bar, and at Bramare, I still when I got there, I'm like, oh, I don't know, like this, I don't know what that is. So then sometimes the guests and Constantine will constantly bring in new stuff and not even say anything. You know, I'm just like, oh, look, a new product, you know. Yeah. But I'm only there once or twice a week. But and then the guests will say, oh man, like I wonder what that's like. I'm like, I wonder what it's like too.
Yeah. And
then I'll set out 3 glasses for the 2 guests and 1 for me. And, you know, and again, I'm not pouring like a shot.
Yeah.
I'm pouring a sip.
Yeah.
But we're tasting together. We'll even cheers. And that guest has a different experience based on like, okay, this isn't corporate nickel and dime. Like, oh, I couldn't taste this. You know what I mean? And that's part of really creating an experience for anybody. And it makes me enjoy my work because, you know, again, you're never pouring full pours for yourself and stuff like that. But to taste spirits in real time with guests and converse about it, because that's certain bars are those bars. Like Bramare is one of those bars where industry comes to kind of geek out, which is definitely the goal that Constantine and Evan Glussman.
Well, it's a great location for that too.
And the bar is just, I mean, it's definitely my favorite layout of a bar to work in yet. And I've worked at some really cool spots. It's really great. And it's a Perlick bar. So shout out to Tobin Ellis.
Our bar is Perlick as well.
Yeah, they make some of the best equipment, though you are still responsible for making it make sense in your bar design.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah. And there's the people that like the pull-out drawers and the people that don't. So there is different schools of thought, you know.
You also have to make sure you have the right kitchen install company as well.
See, now I don't know anything about that. But while you talk about, if you want to elaborate on that, I'm going to make our final cocktail, the gin fizz. And I also I will try to incorporate. I want to make one other one with Weber Ranch vodka to see because it's not a typical vodka. A typical vodka, you're not getting too many unique characters, out of it, and a great neutral vodka, such as, like a French grain vodka or something, or a French vodka like Grey Goose or something. It's like rainwater or very like you're not getting a lot of flavor from it. Whereas Weber Ranch has flavor, but it's still a vodka, but it's made from agave. So I was just curious how that would play, and if that is if you could treat it like, oh, where gin goes, this could be a fun riff on the gin fizz. Let's do a Weber Ranch fizz. So I want to do those three, and I'm going to make one extra one. That's the.
Well, let me ask you about the gin fizz, because back in, David Cooper, who was my bar manager for a long time at Carnevino.
Love Cooper.
Cooper and the crew, Adam Rains, Brad, who's still with me at Brezza, they would always make me this gin. They called it a gin fizz for the late nights that I would be with the cigar guys, because gin's my favorite spirit. It can be herbaceous, it can be citrus driven, it can be juniper driven. Like, I just feel like it's like the most versatile neutral spirit that you have out there. And I can just drink a lot of gin for some reason. But
It's the original flavored vodka.
yeah. They used to make me this gin fizz that it wasn't egg white. It just was basically sparkling water. I feel like lemon juice, maybe a little lime, and gin, but it was like super chilled, shaken really hard, so it was just crushable. Like, you could drink it really quickly. But Cooper's always told me that the rumor was that this specific gin fizz had been consumed by some individual back in the past. Like, he was a town kind of drunk or whatever, and he'd drink so many of them that he eventually got so drunk that he ate the glass at the end.
But that's obviously.
Probably like an old wives' tale.
I mean, so I've been trying to get scheduled with Cooper for
you
a
gotta get
while.
Cooper on,
Well,
yeah.
he's definitely coming on. It's just a question of when, because he does Spur Vodka now. That's his vodka,
Yep.
as well as owning Spaghetti Western.
Yep.
And he really made a name for himself when he was working with Nolettes.
And
when he
he's
was
a
doing golf
granddaddy, and he's
tournaments.
got all kinds of kids. And
That's right.
yeah, he's got multiple grandchildren now.
Nolette's my favorite by
Nolette is
far.
hands down one of my favorite too.
It's so good. I'm not a huge juniper fan, and that one is it's tucked away so well.
I can't remember if it was when Ryan McGinnis worked for. One of the guys had gotten me a like a Chef Nicole Brisson Nolette bottle that I still have at home. That's beautiful.
Old Drumshambo Irish gunpowder gin.
Did you say that Robbie was opening up a mozzarella spot?
A mozzarella bar, yep.
What's a mozzarella bar?
Are you familiar with Nancy Silverton?
No.
So she's got a mozzarella bar out in LA. She's got Osteria Mozza, she's got Pizzeria Mozza, and she's got a beautiful bar that she actually physically works a lot of the time.
Is it a cocktail bar?
No, all mozzarella. So like stracciatella, fresh mozzarella, bufalo mozzarella, burrata, any fresh mozzarella product that you can think of, and then all the amazing things that go with them, like whether it be oven roasted tomatoes, artichokes, toasted pine nuts, basil pesto.
How does it work?
currants. You're just composing all these dishes like with mozzarella.
So that's the focus and the theme is
Yep.
the mozzarella.
Yeah, you can have other dishes as well, but I mean, you think about how versatile. Like I'm in the process. I can't really talk about it too much, but we're potentially reconcepting, and we're talking about kind of veering off and doing a little bit more of like a American Italian concept in a space. And something I did when I had my off the strip restaurant is I would do like a mozzarella tasting, and it would be stracciatella, buffalo mozzarella versus like fresh mozzarella. And then we do all these kind of accoutrements that you could add. You could upcharge for caviar, you could upcharge for really high-end anchovies, but then you'd have your classic like pistachio pesto, basil pesto, oven roasted tomatoes, and you can make a meal just around that when you think about it. Great bread, can you imagine having Chef Gio's bread from Manzu, that great cheese and pestos, and yeah, but he just opened. He literally just opened a couple weeks ago.
Awesome. That sounds fun. It sounds unique.
Yeah, and I'm excited. I mean, just that the Japanese Italian. We went to eat there when I did the Anne Saxby Legacy Fund at Chelsea Market in September. My old boss from Italia Bastianich and I had dinner there, and we had really wanted to see Robbie and just kind of see what he was doing. And it was probably the most memorable meal I had in 2024.
When you say Japanese, is that Italian noodles in like a Japanese style
So he's doing
broth?
like Italian ramens, like you would, your classic truffle Tyrene. He's doing a similar kind of sauce, table side with the ramen. He did this beautiful play on like a Caesar salad, but with some Japanese influences. He did like the octopus takoyaki. He did that like with some Italian influence. He did.
So octopus, is that like the ink, like making
Like the those balls that you have in Japanese restaurants. They like, I don't. It's hard to describe if you haven't had it before, but it's really delicious. He did a skewer kind of similar to those flavor profiles. He did a couple like plated fish dishes that were really incredible. It was, I mean, we had like 10 courses. It was the most food I'd probably eaten in a row.
And this is in LA?
No, this is in Montclair, New Jersey.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. That's beautiful.
I apparently drink far too fast for my guests. That's what I found out on this. Thank God Kyler's kind of keeping up with me here. Nothing. This podcast gives me a lot of personal thought because I'm always like, oh, I'm already done. Oh, she's still got a full cocktail. Okay, so that's how normal people drink. Cool.
Well, I'm talking a lot too.
That's fair. That's fair. Well, and I get to like listen on. Yeah, gin fizz. Salud. And thank you. Great suggestions. I mean, like, you can't get away from Italian just like me. Like, I just love Italian drinks, Italian culture, all of it,
Now we need to get you to Italy.
It's delicious. Definitely can't wait to go. I'm hoping to go with Chris Militillo sometime at the end of this year or before the end of this year. We'll see, but that would be a privilege. So when we were opening up Vetri, I had the opportunity, Livio was nice enough because he had to change plans and he was supposed to go to Turin to tour some vermouth distilleries. Which, again, and Turin is the vermouth spot. There's other spots you can make it, but Vermouth di Torino is a specific vermouth. It's excellent. It's got a lot of rich history. That is where the original vermouths come from for the Americano, and all that. So a lot of history, and to be able to go there free, where and technically I'd be getting the same treatment that Livio would have gotten.
Yeah.
I was like, please, because Kane was my boss at Vetri. I'm like, please, Kane, I understand we just opened up on November 1st, and this is in November, and this is in 2 weeks. Can I please go to this? And he's like, we can't. And I actually had to miss that trip, and I was like, damn. So it is definitely my goal to get there soon.
Yeah, for me, it's such a good hard reset from Vegas, because you're out in the countryside. We try to get as many like pasta factory tours and cheese tours, prosciutto tours, all the things kind of around the convention that we go to as well. And you just realize how much history goes into every Italian ingredient that we bring to the States. I think the most eye-opening for me is I've done 2 acciaia tours, which are like the vinegar makers in Modena. And when you go to one of those acciaias, so it starts very much like wine. It starts in like a mother barrel, and then it goes down into like these other hardwood barrels, and it loses moisture, gets like the flavor development over time. They become more concentrated, and some of these vinegars take 75 years to make or 100 years.
Whoa, what?
And that actual vinegar maker might not ever see it come to somebody's table in the lifetime that he spent there just tasting on a daily basis and understanding the nuances of the vinegar. And then also to realize the health benefits of a lot of these ingredients, that those aged balsamics, they're good for digestion, they're good for hangovers, they're good for so many things because of all the great ingredients and time and love that goes into every one of them.
I'm a huge believer in like the vinegars and what they do for you too. So I do love that. And it's honestly incredible what you can do with cocktails with them and totally change it up, and non-alcoholic cocktails with vinegars.
Yeah.
If you make like a vinegar shrub with like a berry note or whatever, and you throw that in a cocktail, people are like, oh, I think I am drinking alcohol, but you do have to play because a lot of people don't like vinegar. So you have to.
I had to do a 35 shrub tasting for the fancy food show. time in San Francisco.
That's got to torture palate.
Yeah, it was a lot. It was a lot. You definitely got the palate fatigue by the end. I was like, ugh, I'm good.
Well, Nicole, this has been really incredible. I'm grateful that you made time for this in your busy schedule. Please. So how do people get, if I wanted to get your steak right now, can I get it?
Any hours of operation. So we open at 11:30 at Brezza. We close at 10 o'clock at night. Any of those hours that we're operating at Brezza or Brazazu, just come ask for a manager. Steaks are always available
Where are those located? Those restaurants?
at Resorts World. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's north end of the main strip, Las Vegas.
One of the easiest casinos to get in and out of, parking wise, and now I think we're charging for parking right now anymore, which is a great incentive for locals.
Well, that's another thing. It's like some people that I do want to say, if you're a local and you paid for parking, a lot of places, not all, they don't tell you this everywhere, but you scan your ID at the bottom and it will let you park for free. Also, sometimes it just says be a club member.
Yeah.
And you get it for free. So that's how I know Resorts World was working it.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, okay, it's $18 or
Get your player's card.
get your player's card, which is literally putting your ID in a machine and it spits out a card. So it's like, okay, so it's free parking.
Yeah.
You just have to be smart enough to read the instructions.
Yeah.
So but that was the big thing in like Vegas when you started. I remember when there was no parking fees in Vegas at all.
I too, yeah.
And then just out of nowhere, it was like, okay, a few hotels are doing it. You're like, fuck them. And then all like 90% of them were doing it.
Yeah, I was just at Paris, and it was for a work dinner or a work lunch. God, it was like $36, I think.
Well, that, and then there's also event parking. So
Yeah.
like, let's say I want to go to New York Hotel, which I don't know. I mean, there's Gillies in there or whatever, or whatever. There's a few spots in there.
Yeah.
Dry aged steaks.
There it is. But when you park in there, even if you have nothing to do with the game, you're not going to see the Golden Knights. You're paying $40 for that parking spot.
Yeah.
And it's just called event parking. And you're like, but I didn't even know there was a game today.
Yeah.
They're like, sorry, and like and being an Uber, the Ubers are $20 to $30 more than on normal. So there's a lot of that.
Yeah.
But, okay. So thank you so much. Check her out. Check out Brezza. Check out what is it called? The Steak de Brisson. How is
Bisteaka De Brisson.
Bisteaka De Brisson. Love that. But yeah, check all that out and we'll see you soon. Really great. Thank you.